Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here are your hosts, Brian E. Roach and Zach Meckler.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Joe Kuzma, and we're here for a very special middle-of-the-week free agency edition. We're not sure if we'll have yet another one of these coming your way, but considering all the news that has surfaced since the beginning of the week and the stuff that's probably going to come up even as we're recording this show and trying to give this to you about as live can get, we'll try and stay apprised of all the details. But anyways, my name's Joe Kuzma, and the Juliet to my Romeo hanging on by here, Mr. Brian E. Roach. What's up, Brian?
I'm not responding to that.
That's a shame, though. Somebody said this show is going downhill, so I'm just driving it off a cliff. Maybe you could be Thelma and I'll be Louise then.
All right, I can deal with that one. I don't know why, but I can deal with that one.
I think you just like the madness that comes with that one. Maybe not there's not the romance there. So anyways, Brian, we talked about Steelers' needs and activity and free agency and how they wouldn't do anything that would maybe surprise people, even though I think we're a little surprised. And there's some other things going on, too, around not only the NFL, but the AFC North that we have to discuss. And I guess since you and the professor got to talk about Mr. Big Chest the other day, I'll just get my little 2 cents in that. Wow, that news died real fast. So it just went away, swept under the rug, which is where I want it. Because if it would have happened any earlier, then we would have had to hear about it even more. And I'm just glad to we're going to be talking about another ex-Steeler here in a few short moments. But there's people out there, let's just jump into like the biggest whopper of the last maybe 24 to 48 hours is Odell Beckham Jr. And a lot of people want to put Odell Beckham Jr. on the same kind of, I don't know, wavelength as an Antonio Brown, even though I don't feel he's accomplished as much. And everyone's already going to hand, especially if you're in Cleveland, these Cleveland fans, they are already, this is every offseason. Usually it's not free agency. Usually it's the draft because they have umpteen picks and they feel they've already won the Super Bowl. And I don't know. I look at Odell Beckham over the last, of course, he's been banged up and injured the last 2 years, so his production hasn't been as high with somebody like an Eli Manning and a porous offensive line and trying to get him the ball and all these other things. I see him go to Cleveland, everyone's like adding all these weapons. Well, I don't know. I just saw, what was the one tight end they said they added to Cleveland? I'll look him up in a second. They were like, yet another weapon. And I'm like, is every single signing a weapon? Do you think Jesse James going to the Detroit Lions is a weapon for the Detroit Lions? Jesse James was essentially the second string tight end in Pittsburgh. He is not ascending to tight end one when they keep trying to replace him over and over. And we'll talk about Jesse too. But just in contrast and comparing with what the Browns did, first round pick, a guy they spent a first-round pick on in Jabril Peppers, who was a starting safety and also a special teamer for them. And then what else was it? A fourth-rounder, third-rounder, whatever. That I feel the Giants. Yeah. I feel the Giants, with the exception of the dead cap, which they also sent Olivier Vernon over to the Browns too. They have something like $35 million in dead money. I feel that is really foolish on the Giants' part. Otherwise, I think this kind of leans in the Giants' favor. Now there are people out there, as it get long-winded, there's people out there. Why didn't they get this for Antonio Brown? And we pounded our fist on the table and said, this guy, why would you take the risk? He says he's not going to show up for a new team unless he has this specific deal or the situation is right. And we saw all those rumors surface with him with the Buffalo Bills a week ago and not wanting to go there, saying he wouldn't show up for camp, right? And so the Raiders were willing to throw money at them, but there was such a risk by the new club taking on a guy that's already holding his current team hostage and then holding potential suitors hostage because he didn't show up. There's no reason to not take him for his word. He literally didn't show up week 17 why take they're not going to take the risk of giving away a young player that a first-round pick was spent on in like a Peppers, and a first-round pick that's in the middle of the draft, and yet another whatever round pick. So I really didn't have a problem with the Steelers got there. I actually think they got the best they could. It's a little disappointing just in the fact that they got a 3 alone just for Martavis Bryant, so you couldn't fleece Chucky as much, but I don't see what team was willing to take on that contract, had the cap room, and was also going to give up either high-quality players or a lot of draft capital.
Yeah, look, it's kind of interesting that we get to address the OBJ trade simply because it's to Cleveland. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't talk about it that much. But, the people, this is the point I want to address. The people who are claiming the Steelers should have gotten this kind of a value, the people who are out there saying this is what a real GM does when he trades a star receiver, are living in an interesting world where up is down and black is white and the sky is green and the grass is blue, because you're talking about completely different scenarios and situations. As we have said ad nauseum, Antonio Brown did everything possible to convert and destroy his trade value. He made it otherwise the Steelers would have gotten more. We don't know for sure what the deal was with Buffalo, but probably it would have equated to a very high first-round pick. And that would have been what everybody would have thought was great. Oh, fantastic. But Antonio Brown made sure that couldn't happen. And for the most part, any GM is going to look at that scenario and say, I'm not interested. And as it boiled down, there was only one team willing to take a chance. And when you have a single market, your options are don't do the deal or do the deal. And whatever deal you can get is whatever deal you can get. And it was to a point where there was really no benefit to holding on to Antonio Brown. None. So that being said, the OBJ trade, it is on paper, I think Cleveland has definitely done good things. I'm not going to poo-poo Cleveland, the team, or what they have managed to accomplish, but it is much simpler to work these kind of deals and make these kind of moves when you have an unlimited amount of cap space because you have a second-year quarterback, a bunch of rookies on their rookie deals, and $1 bazillion to spend. Steelers aren't in that position. When some of these rookie deals start to come to fruition, the Browns will find themselves in a much different world. But that being said, it's great that they're taking this window of opportunity when they have this cap space and trying to do something. That does not mean any of this will work.
Well, see, that's exactly what I was going to get at, is everyone that complains and says, look what this team's doing. Look what the Jets are doing. Look what the Raiders are doing. Look what the Browns are doing. Now, the Browns they finished the season on an upswing. And if I didn't mention already, the friends, the family, the people close to me that are already texting me as though acting as if Cleveland has won some sort of championship here in March already. Number one, Mike Hilton tweeted out, you still got to play the games. That was one thing. We've seen this blow up in people's faces before. And my reply to at least two of my close friends that sent me these texts, I said, well, what about your offensive line? And both of I brought them down from like cloud 9, and they both kind of gave one of those kind of things, because it's like, well, if Mayfield's running around for his life and, you average maybe 3 yards a carry or something. Look, I like Nick Chubb. I like a lot of the things that Cleveland is doing right here too. Their secondary has got a little bit of issues too. They let Collins go. I think they have enough suitable bodies to replace him. They still have some draft picks, but they mortgaged their first rounder for this year, which would also give them a fifth-year option on maybe a high quality. What was the pick? It's like top 15, right? I mean, that's just, to me, that's kind of mind-blowing. Now, you get somebody who's a potential all-pro player. Is he the right fit? Is he going to work in the same locker room or same environment with – there's a lot of personalities there now, because you added Beckham to an already intense guy in Jarvis Landry, who I happen to like a lot, but I felt he had a little bit of an underwhelming season. Part of that you could also throw as far as, hey, Hugh Jackson was the coach for half a year. You could also say the same thing with Greg Robinson was coach for half a year. They had the success, and then they showed him the door. You don't know what's going to work like with Freddie Kitchens Kitchens there. You got to assume that Baker Mayfield has a relationship that he did not have with Hugh Jackson by all the dirty looks and stares and different things of that nature. That he gave his previous head coach. He may have a relationship with Kitchens, but he's a personality. Landry's a personality. We don't know what other personalities may surface out of the guys that are rookies. You don't know, Myles Garrett or something like that. There's things there that potentially scare you as a team that has to defend this offense. But I laugh. It was Demetrius Harris, by the way. Browns have added another weapon in Demetrius Harris, a weapon? I mean, okay, we may as well call Darren Fells, who they just got rid of, a weapon or something like that. They still have Njoku. He still has problems holding on to the ball. You saw Brashad Perryman was supposed to return and then saw that, well, they added Beckham. I might not have the playing time, so he's already, out of town. And where'd he go? The Buccaneers, I think. And
I think that's right.
Yeah, to the Buccaneers. And it's just, not that Perryman was anything that was a given. He seemed to have a little bit of a revival after bouncing around and having no success whatsoever, being a former first-round draft pick and also being snake-bitten with injuries out of Baltimore, by the way. So it's like, I look at Cleveland overall, and it's like some of these things, it's like, yeah, they could be potentially scary, and they got a lot of guys on the cheap, and they may have a short window for success. They could be a front runner to win the division, but there's still a lot of, you're talking about a Cleveland Browns team that won 5 games last year, 6 games, 6-10, and that's the best they've been in a decade. And, a lot of people want to already christen some of these teams, champions or whatever be the case, for spending wads of cash, and they still have to produce on the field. It's something that they haven't done. This isn't a team that already has a foundation of successful and talented players that they're paying, many of them with high payroll or whatever, like the Steelers. The Steelers, as we said, a lot of people are like, they're poking fun at re-signing Jordan Berry, for example. Okay, Jordan Berry's coming back on 2 years, the punter. And it's like, take that, Cleveland. And it's like, well, it's not like the Steelers have these huge holes. It's not like the Steelers were going to go out and get Odell Beckham and have the cap space and want to add that, variable to the locker room after what they just went through. And then there's the rest of this. I'm sure you want to comment on that, but then there's the rest of this hoopla about how are they going to replace Le'Veon Bell? Well, as far as I know, Franco Harris, Bam Morris, Jerome Bettis, Barry Foster, Amos Zaraway, and Rashard Mendenhall all had the same stats as Le'Veon Bell last year, and that was 0 because he was already replaced. And I think it's kind of funny to see what happened there, but I'll get your thoughts first.
Yeah, look,
where do you
people
start?
seem to want to gloss over. Yes, the only confirmed, absolute, in detail, signed to the paper signings are Chickalo and Jordan Berry. What do you expect them to do with Jordan Berry? I don't know what the details are. I'll be surprised if he's getting a lot of money. And yes, Jordan Berry has his issues, but they need a punter. This doesn't mean that they will not, bring in another punter to compete with him during camp, and that they will not end up cutting him if he stinks or trading him away to somebody else who wants a punter. We don't know the terms yet, and once we do, look, I'll be the first to say if the terms are outrageous and they're giving him a boatload of money, that's not going to happen. But even a boatload of money as it equates to a punter, I'll say it's a bad move. But for right now, I'm not ready to say that because I don't have the details. The Chickalo thing, look, we had said when we talked about this, I thought it was time to move on from Chickalo. I thought you figured out the best you could get out of him, and I would rather run with Ola and Keon Adams. But they wanted the depth. I can live with that. It's not that Chickalo's been, brutally awful. He's a solid backup at best. He's not going to be a starter. So, okay, but he didn't get starter money either. We forget in all of this, nobody seems to want to talk about the one thing that they may have actually done, because I know it's not written in stone yet. They can't do it until whatever time today. But the cornerback that they signed from Kansas City,
Steven Nelson,
that's a move, and it's a good move. It's a solid move. It's a better move than most of Steelers Nation either understands that it is or is willing to give credit that it is. It addresses a direct need, and it addresses it pretty well. This is a much better cornerback than people think or are ready to admit. And if you look at what he's done, is he perfect? No, but it's a very, very solid upgrade on what they had and gives them some flexibility in the draft. It's a good, solid move. I'm not sure that they're done yet. They never really are, big players. And this idea of people who are just, once in my lifetime, I would like to see the Steelers do something big in free agency on the first day and go after prime targets. They do go after prime targets at times. They were interested in Roby. They were interested in Hightower down the road. I'm sure they called about other guys too. But guess what? They don't have $88 million to pay any of these guys. So they're not going to go, whole hog because they don't lose. They don't have losing seasons over and over and over again so that they can build up all this, free agent capital. And expecting that to change is crazy. So the second question that I would like to pose to the folks out there who are so upset that we haven't made a move yet, of the moves that have existed, which one would you have done? What move that is out there do you feel like the Steelers, could have accomplished realistically? Because I know people are going to go, they should have got C.J. Mosley. They couldn't have afforded C.J. Mosley. Not a shot in the world. There was no chance they could pay that money. So, look at what they are in a position to realistically do. Look at the deals that existed and tell me, what is it you would have expected them to do? What deal could you have made that would have been better than what they've done?
Well, and who's to say that they're done yet? And, where do I go here? We got a lot of guys to talk about. I mean, we basically talked about how Antonio Brown sabotaged his own value or his value for the Steelers just for his own selfish interests. I think we can finally close the door on that, and maybe we never have to speak of him ever again unless, they play or we get to make fun of him for not having a good season. Le'Veon Bell, we get to make fun of for much the same reasons, and I just lost my tweet. I was actually going to read something from Mark Madden. Who knew that I was going to agree so much with Mark Madden and Andrew Filipponi in the past several days? These guys have been...
If that's not a sign of craziness in the world, and I tweeted this, when Andrew Filipponi is right about something, there's a problem.
Well, here's Mark Madden, and for folks who aren't familiar, Le'Veon Bell signing with the Jets for less money than the Steelers offered last year, and the guaranteed money or the money he would have made would have basically balanced itself out, and he would have been making more money had he stayed put. Now, as Mark Madden says here, Le'Veon Bell's gambit failed. He got less money than the Steelers offered, and he'll never get back the $14.5 he would have earned this past year. Now it gets worse, Bell has to play for the New York Jets. They suck. And then I'm like, yeah, you know what? You're right on this, Mark Madden. And it's just, we all said this, and it kind of validates what myself, Brian, and many others here, our hosts and contributors here at Steel City Underground have said. There's no way this guy's out of his mind. You know what I mean? It was another one of those situations. Some other people are trying to defend the fact that, well, he got to sit for a year, but he didn't get paid for a year, so he lost his earning potential. It's not like you get younger in it or you get older and then it's a good thing in the NFL. It's not like sitting out a year means, well, you don't turn a year older, especially at the running back position. It's kind of crazy. So, Andrew Filipponi has way too much garbage on his.
Go through.
Oh my goodness, he's just he's retweet city here, and I'm never going to find the quote I'm looking for from him, unfortunately. He's making fun of course, the Anthony Chickillo. Don't count the Steelers out just yet because they re-signed Chickillo. Not like Chickillo's deal, 2 years, $8 million total, is some earth-shattering deal for a reserve linebacker. I mean, come on, guys. I mean, why are we making fun of this when he's a solid special teams contributor and a guy who's capable, maybe not being a full-time starter, but spot duty or in a rotation or something like that. There's nothing that, and this is a guy that they brought up themselves. themselves. This is what we talked about when we talked about how active they would be in free agency and bringing in back some of their own guys. This is one of their own guys that they pay, and he gets a decent reward. He's not getting starter money. Everybody wants to make fun of that, and Jordan Berry, as we said, and we'll get into a few more too, because really, what holes do the Steelers have? This isn't like I was talking about, like the Cleveland Browns. They trade away Kevin Zeitler, and they got Corbett, and they have some other guys that are still trying to mash together an offensive line that's going to work for them. So they re-signed Greg Robinson, and he's on a 1-year deal, and there's incentives and stuff because Greg Robinson has not been a consistent good player. They did go out and get Sheldon Richardson, a defensive tackle, and so their front seven looks really good on defense. It'll be interesting to see what they do. They still have Ward, who's a promising maybe second-year player. We always talk about our Buckeye guys that we know pretty closely here, and he had a very surprising rookie year. We'll see if he could continue it. You know what I mean? The Cincinnati Bengals aren't making like all these earth-shattering moves. They bring back 2 guys. They brought back a linebacker in Preston Brown. They brought back their tackle Bobby Hart. We'll get to the Ravens because the Ravens is just like there's madness going on there, and we'll just leave them for a little bit later if we get to them today at all. But let's bounce back to Steven Nelson. So the Steelers, we know the Steelers are interested. They need a corner. Everybody says they need a corner. And then when they sign a corner or they draft a corner, it's always not that corner. And then some of the naysayers, of course, everybody that's a negative Nancy is going to go out there and say they need to make a move or they need to do this, and then not that move, and then they try and be proven smart or right or whatever be the case. The Steelers have a number 1 corner. His name's Joe Hayden. They did not need a number 1 corner, but they have a guy who has potential to be a number 1 corner and is definitely at his floor, not his ceiling, at his floor, definitely a cornerback 2, a guy that can play opposite Joe Hayden. This is going to work out and pay dividends for the Steelers because now in the draft, they can be patient. They don't have to pull the trigger necessarily on a corner with their first pick or even on the first 2 days if they don't want to. They could even wait till next season potentially. They're going to eventually have to get somebody in that rotation to be behind Joe Hayden because he's not getting any younger, and corners eventually hit that same type of wall that wide receivers and some of these skill positions do as well at a much earlier age than, say, like a tackle or a quarterback. So with all that in mind, it gives them a lot of flexibility. According to the professor, we worked on a joint article today over on the website. We talk a little bit more in detail about Nelson because Nelson's had more pass breakups than anybody since Troy Polamalu. He had as many interceptions by himself playing for the Chiefs last year than the entire Steelers defense had for all of 2018. And there's some naysayers that were out there, and they're talking about, well, they gave up a lot of passing yards. Well, nobody threw for more attempts or yards against any other defense other than the Kansas City Chiefs. 1, because they weren't that great of a defense, and 2, their offense was so ridiculously high-scoring and good, everybody had to go into panic mode, even the Steelers when they played, and start passing the ball and play catch-up. That's what you do. You pass the ball, you pass the ball, you pass the ball. You can't chew clock when you're down 21-0 to the Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes and all these other guys. So that's the reason for that. The Wizards at Pro Football Focus love him. What was he ranked? Like 21st out of all the corners last year? He ranked ahead of like a lot of... 22nd, I'm sorry. But he was ranked ahead a lot of notable names as far as that. Think about this. There's 2 starting corners and there's 32 NFL teams. I don't know where Joe Hayden was on that list. I imagine he's in the top 32 as well. Wait, you got 2, not just 1, but 2 of the top corners in the league we're just filling holes and spots here. That seems pretty promising for the Steelers. We already talked about Sean Davis and we talked about Edmonds' progress, and we already know what Mike Hilton's got there. They still have Cam Sutton, who can play both in the slot or on the outside, and they're still going to throw a bone toward Artie Burns and see if maybe last year was a fluke, if this guy still has it and can play in the league, but it's his last year. He's going to fill a roster spot. He may be a special teamer. He may even get cut during camp or right after camp. There's no way of saying for sure, you know what I mean? But he's a guy that's on the roster pretty much on the cheap right now, that they don't have to move, and they could see how that works and then see what the rest of their free agency or offseason plans are. So the Steven Nelson signing, I happen to like an awful lot. And he's a physical guy too. He's 5'11". Everybody's going to look at that, but he can tackle, he can hit, and he plays bigger than what his physical his physical stature is, much like Hilton.
Yeah, I agree. He's a good tackler. He has issues, but all corners do. I want to say the last things I'm hopefully ever going to say about Le'Veon Bell. And look, nobody here really trashed Bell. We all didn't. Again, we didn't necessarily like his approach, but we all agreed he had the right to do what he wanted to do to try and get the money he thought he was going to deserve. Now, whether we thought he was delusional in his thinking, that's up to us. But none of us trashed Le'Veon Bell the way that we might be trashing Antonio Brown.
Yes.
So different circumstances there.
Much different.
Bell made a gamble that, in my opinion, did not pay off. We all said this. We said this as long ago as the year after he signed his first franchise tag. We said he will franchise again or he won't play. Then he will leave and he will not get the money he wanted. And, it wasn't that difficult to project that out. And it's not, people want to compare it to Todd Gurley. It's not Todd Gurley. Todd Gurley's younger. Todd Gurley does not have a history of injury the way he does, although he does now. And Todd Gurley does not have the suspensions that Bell had. Bell is not a bad person, and this is not a bad, it's not a bad character thing that he chose to do this. It just didn't work, and in my view, it was never going to work. So. He made his bed. He's got a lie in it. The tweet about not being willing to play for the Jets for even $60 million. I guess what he meant is, no, $60 million. That's too much. I got to pay. I got to do it for less. That's not how it came off. But of course, that didn't age well, and he's deleted that tweet. But Twitter is forever.
Yes.
And I have the screen capture. If nobody, and I'm sure I know others do because I've seen it all over the place. All right. So, Bell's to the Jets now. We'll see him when we play the Jets, and it'll be lots of fun for us to watch him not get 100 yards. So, as far as the rest of this goes,
because he didn't run for 100 yards many times behind the Steelers line. What do the Jets have there? I mean, and it's not like it's not like Darnold is going to throw people off with his game either. I find the whole thing comical. It's not like I want to see people fail, but when you hurt the team, and I'm going to say Bell hurt the team much. Playing around with him and just not being a man and saying you're going to sit out. That is where I have my problem. He has every right to sit out, but it was he may report this week and all the things that are leaked and his little jabs and his rap songs or riding on a jet ski or whatever his other stuff that was going on with that is. But he wasn't under contract. It's a completely different situation from Antonio Brown now, who may become another he who shall not be named on this show.
Mm-hmm. There's a good chance of that. Look. Somebody posted the question the other day, and I know we're going to do a Hall of Honor show coming up here some point in time, but somebody posted the other day, do Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell ever get in the Hall of Honor? I don't think Le'Veon Bell did simply because his career is too short and he didn't do enough during it, didn't contribute to any championships. Antonio Brown, probably through his performance, deserves it, but I don't know. There's a black mark on that legacy that I don't know is going to get scrubbed clean anytime soon. It's in my view much worse than you're he who shall not be named, Mr. Harrison.
But you named
and what happened here? Yeah. But it is what it is, and I'm tired of talking about both of them. So
yeah, which is completely fine. I'm sure people are tired of listening about it too. So we can now move on. Maybe finally.
Yes. Again, I like this the signing. I think it's a good, and someday I'll learn his name so I don't keep forgetting it.
Steven Nelson. It is about it. His name may as well be Joe Smith or something. It's about all the more of a basic name you could have.
Generic name, yes.
It's kind of like William Jackson, who he ranked ahead of, by the way. So very plain name. I wish they would call him Bill Jackson.
He needs a nickname. Cool.
Yeah.
He needs a nickname. I need to know the nickname. Then I'll be good. So me and nicknames. So you got to have a nickname.
Baby Hayden. Nah, that might not be good.
I don't know.
We'll work on that.
I'm going to avoid those baby children references if I can.
Oh, geez, I didn't even think about that. I was just thinking like they called Travis Kelce Baby Gronk just because Gronk was good and it was like a clone, like a clone of Gronk.
Oh no, I got you.
Yeah, I know, but I need to explain myself now with an asterisk to make sure I avoid all kind of legal ramifications and don't smear the good name of Steven Nelson less than 24 hours since the announcement of him being signed.
Yep. So, I think that there's still a chance for them to do something. It's going to be a second day something or a third day something. It's going to be, maybe a wide receiver from the group that's still out there. Could be a Golden Tate. But, to be honest, the wide receivers that I think would have helped them heavily,
John Brown,
I think that
he's gone.
Yeah, John Brown, gone.
And Tyrell Williams gone now to the Raiders.
Yeah, gone now to the Raiders. So I look at this and I think that points me at them looking at the draft for a wide receiver and for a linebacker. But again, you never know. We just have to wait and see how that all plays out. The other thing about what they have managed to do, the fact that they got this cornerback, means that it is no longer nearly as imperative that they draft a cornerback in the first round. And it also gives them some play with the fact that they now have 10 picks in the draft. They have, the ability to move around. Zach and I talked about that last time around. Flexibility that if they want to move up to get somebody, let's say a DK Metcalf falls into the 13th, 14th, 15th range and isn't a top 10 pick, and that's a guy they want, they can go get him. Let's say that, a Devin Bush is going to go at 18 or 17, and they've decided that's their guy. They're not stuck, right? They've got a little draft capital to try and make a move. But this is the part that always bothers me, and it bothers me with free agency, and it'll bother me in the draft, is people have an issue when they don't get something done. And they seem to forget it takes two to tango. The Steelers can try all they want, but if you would lambaste them if they overpaid to do something. So, and they're not an organization that's going to overpay, so that doesn't really ever happen. But you gotta at least say if you cannot force other teams to do what they want. The Steelers do not have the final say in every transaction. They can't go to players and say, you're going to sign here, and that's the way it is. It just doesn't work that way. They can't go to other teams and say, you're going to make this trade for us. And there appears to be a great portion of Steelers Nation that has that mentality. Thinking, well, they could have gotten it done if they tried harder. Sometimes you can't.
Yeah.
And it just, it just doesn't work that way. So, especially with free agency, and I'm going to go back to that question. I'm going to keep asking it. Where should they have gone? What deal did they miss that has so offended everyone that they cannot just be glad we got a cornerback that looks like he might be a solid choice?
Bradley Roby and Ronald Darby, of course, because Darby played. We talked about this on the show, and I don't remember off the top of my head 6 games in the last 2 years. Basically, he's the Marcus Gilbert of corners, and that's the kind of risk you wanted. And then people were talking about whether or not Gilbert should be back, and there's one that didn't age well, as a few of these haven't. Jesse James leaving, and that surprised me. I think that was a lot of money. Good for him. And these are the guys I wish well. It was just kind of silly because a lot of people were like, pay the man in the Bell instance, and not to bring him back up, but they try. Now it obviously looks foolish that the Steelers absolutely did try to pay the man because he didn't get the same value out of the Jets contract, and the Jets one was one where they were pretty much saying, hey, take it or leave it, and I guess a lot of teams didn't want anything to do with him after sitting out for the whole year and how he handled some of that business too. So as you said, to tango, it's another factor in that. I don't know, man. I think with wide receiver, it's kind of tough for the Steelers because you look around at all of the teams that draft and you look at this: Cardinals, 49ers, Jets, Raiders, Raiders probably off the books now with Terrell Williams, Jordy Nelson still there, and Antonio Brown having gone there now. Buccaneers, I mean, Perryman, I don't know. I mean, they got Mike Evans, and they just lost to Sean Jackson. The New York Giants could probably use some help there. They could use help practically everywhere on their roster, though.
Oh yeah,
Jaguars. I mean, the Jaguars, aren't they the big victor now? They're gonna steamroll everyone. I mean, they didn't make the playoffs last year, but Nick Foles is going to get them there. So, to be determined. We'll see how Nick Foles does. I mean, he was Cinderella basically. Clock struck midnight, everything turned into a pumpkin, and you're still walking around with the glass slipper looking for that Nick Foles. And he had a little bit of that Foles magic, with Wentz going down at the end of the season last year. And quarterback is that rare thing. You don't know where Kyler Murray is. He's the big one. You don't even know how many of these quarterbacks are going to go this early. This isn't exactly last year's draft class, but there are still teams in need. You still have the Denver Broncos there at 10. Let me rewind. Lions at 8, Bills at 9, Broncos at 10, Bengals are at 11. God forbid that they draft another wide receiver, but you just never know. They kind of are as the Ravens are the tight ends, the Bengals are the wide receivers and corners. Let's see. Packers are at 12. Packers could use another weapon for sure, and they were working on defense and free agency, so you don't know. Dolphins are at 13. Yeah, they could use everything, maybe even a quarterback. Falcons, I doubt, need a wide receiver. Redskins need a lot of work. Panthers could use some help there. Then you got the Giants again now with the Cleveland pick. The Vikings, I think the Vikings are kind of set at wide receiver, and the Titans are kind of set at wide receiver. And then you're at the Steelers at pick 20. So just giving that some thought, which of these teams don't have a need for wide receiver that they can potentially convince to move? I look at 14 maybe with the Falcons. The Falcons, they could use some help with defense. They could use an extra pick, I would think. That's where I'd call my shot. Potentially the Panthers, if they want to jump out back in front of the Giants, should the Giants go in a different direction at pick 6 or not, take a quarterback or try and move up for somebody, with their extra first rounder packaged with something else. But they're not going to have to jump in front of, the Vikings or Titans, I don't think. They'd have to worry about another team jumping in front of them. And I don't think that they got enough ammo and I don't think I want them to use the ammo to jump into the top 10 anywhere. So, we're kind of talking beyond free agency here, but this is kind of the way it shapes these different things. Why don't we change a little bit here? Let's talk about some of these moves that have happened. We already talked about Bell. You got the Lions are basically looking like a clone of the Patriots as the Titans are trying to be too. Yeah. So Trey Flowers goes there to the Lions. Nick Foles, we already mentioned. Landon Collins, big money deal. 6 years, $84 million. Here, let's run these down. So Bell was 4 years, $52 and a half versus the Steelers offered him 5 for $70 last year.
Yep.
Let me see. Earl Thomas. So we're going to talk about the Ravens in a second, but 4 years, $55 million. Big deal there. Trey Flowers, 5 years, $90 million. Where are the Steelers going to find $90 million? Not that Trey Flowers, was ever in their plans, but it's one of those things. Nick Foles, not that he would be in the plans. This is how ridiculous this stuff is getting. We already saw it with Kirk Cousins and Aaron Rodgers last year, but 4 years, $88 million on up to $102 million in incentives. I'm looking at Ben getting extended and getting a little bit of a pay raise as part of that as well. Landon Collins signed to the Redskins, 6 years, $84 million with $45 million guaranteed. That would have never happened in Pittsburgh at all. Anthony Barr backtracked on, I forgot where he was going to go now, but he was going back to the Vikings. 5 years, $67 and a half. CJ Mosley, 5 year, $85 million. Never going to happen. Yeah. That's the Jets too.
51 guaranteed. 51 guaranteed.
That's insane. And the same thing with Tyrann Mathieu, 3 years, $42 million. And, Roby was supposedly offered a 3-year contract by the Steelers, and he took a 1-year, $10 million kind of, I'm going to try and see if I improve my stock. So he's gambling on himself, and that could backfire on him as well. So I don't mind like Nelson. Roby has been hot and cold. We talked about our Buckeyes, you know what I mean? There's another guy hot and cold. I was in on him in the draft and very disappointed when he ended up with the Broncos instead of the Steelers. But then again, you don't know. That would have been another thing. thing that could have turned into an Artie Burns situation, or still could, with more money attached to it. So I think they're very fortunate with the Steven Nelson signing there. So, you look around, and I'm going to go into the AFC North here, Brian. We were making fun of the Ravens and all of their tight ends when they got Boyle, but just earlier today, too, Mark Ingram, formerly of the Saints, running back, 3 years, $15 million. That's not like a real crazy contract, for a running back. Obviously, that's a nice nominal contract. I still don't know how running back's going to play with a Lamar Jackson offense and whatever wide receivers they have left. I think they're just going to put the tight ends out there. But they replaced Eric Weddle with Earl Thomas, which was the big news. 4-year, $55 million with $32 million guaranteed. The Steelers couldn't have made that deal either. So, again, who's winning? You were asking me who was winning free agency. Those moves should improve some of those teams, or in the case of Barr staying with the Vikings, it keeps them as the status quo. They missed the playoffs too, by the way. Another talented team. I think they're probably the biggest disappointment next to the Steelers coming out of 2018 and postseason expectations, in my opinion. Maybe the Packers too, but I didn't think the Packers had it all together just yet, and they may be getting there. Zadarius Smith, they took away from the Ravens. $66 million. Who else just left the Ravens? Well, we said Weddle. We said Zadarius Smith. C.J. Mosley over to the Jets. So, a lot of their teams getting gutted, and they're trying to patch some of those wounds, too. They're going to have they do a lot of that through the draft themselves. Yes, they won the AFC North. I really don't know what they look like right now either. So you can't really say that the Ravens have won anything in free agency. And I don't look at any of these teams as being, the Raiders are spending a lot of money right now, but they took everything down to square one. They scrapped it and they're starting over. So would you rather be a fan of that franchise where they finally make the playoffs and they give a big money contract to their quarterback, and then you have nothing, really nothing to show for it? At least you can enjoy usually double-digit wins in the Steel City. The Raiders, Jets, some of these other teams, not so much. So once again, what does it mean to win free agency?
Look, I don't think anybody wins free agency except for players, and that's fine. That's why it's there. Here's how you win free agency. You don't overpay. Don't put yourself in a position where down the road you can't sign your own guys who may or may not turn into stars. To me, that's how you win free agency. Winning free agency is not finding the splashy pick. It's not, spending. Look, I'm sorry, spending $85 million for C.J. Mosley, who is a good linebacker, but is not an $85 million game-changing person in a defense. I'm sorry, he's just not. That's not winning free agency. That's just spending money because you've got it to spend, and it makes your fan base happy for a little while. But you know what makes your fan base happy long-term? Not losing.
Yeah. I mean, and I just went on the long-winded thing there too just a second ago, just to not butt in on you. But again, it's also what holes did the Steelers have? They have their whole offensive line. They have their starting tight end. They have most of these guys. They have a franchise quarterback. You have Juju Smith-Schuster, so you at least have your number one receiver. You have two slot receivers in Ryan Switzer, and then we found out Eli Rogers' contract tolls for this year as well. You look at the defense. You got the whole defensive line intact still. You have most of your linebacker, whether or not you want to agree and like, some of the players that are in that linebacker group, they're still there. And, I go back to a few years ago, when the year Shazier got hurt, did people think that Shazier was going to be Shazier? No. I mean, they were still complaining and wanting different players at those positions too. So you're never going to make anyone happy. The secondary looks a little solidified. So where else are they going to spend the money? I don't know. They could maybe add a wide receiver. We talked about linebackers. There really isn't anyone there. A lot of those needs will also be met in the draft, so they don't have to spend the big dollars, and they just use them on retaining their own players, because a lot of these teams like the Jets, they're incapable of drafting and developing a C.J. Mosley, and then they have to pay top dollar to get somebody else's C.J. Mosley.
Yeah, look, the positions, you talk about positions in need. It was corner, it was inside linebacker, maybe it's outside linebacker, and probably wide receiver with Brown being gone. Those are the positions they needed to target. And here's what you had in free agency at inside linebacker: Quan Alexander, C.J. Mosley, Jordan Hicks, Preston Brown, Craig Robinson, and Ray Armstrong. Kevin Minter and Deion Buchanan. That's it. Okay, so can't afford C.J. Mosley. You probably can't afford Quan Alexander at the $13.5 million per whatever he got.
54. Yeah, 54 total.
54 million. Yeah.
Yep.
Jordan Hicks, I talked about him last time. I liked him as a potential target. He went to Arizona. So it is what it is. I don't know whether the Steelers were interested in him or not. And I don't know that they could have paid him $34 million. You're talking about a lot of money, and they gave him $20 million guaranteed up front. They could have never fed that into the cap this year. So, Preston Brown, Craig Robinson, Ray Armstrong, these guys aren't going to make a difference for you. So you're not going to go out and spend the money on that. That's my view, is why they probably didn't make a hard push inside linebacker. Instead, they looked at a corner because they know they're going to have to probably try and address the linebacker position in the draft. I know Zach Brown is being released by the Redskins, so there's another name that is going to come in. Is he the answer? No. Is he maybe an upgrade on John Bostic? Maybe. But if he's going to get $10 million a year, it's not worth it. So, again, I'm going to go back to what I said before. You have positions of need. You have things you try and target. But the way you win free agency is you do not hurt your team by overspending for players who, quite frankly, are just good.
No, you hit the nail on the head right there. I mean, it's the same thing everyone has a problem with Bud Dupree, and they already have a problem with him, and then on top of that, they have a problem with him from paying him almost $10 million. And now you find out, after all these deals are hashed out, where's he at now? This is like the same thing we were talking about with Vance McDonald a year ago. He's in the 20s somewhere, like 23rd or 24th highest paid edge rusher or whatever. And you still, you would feel that's unacceptable, because when you look at some of the dollars versus production, you see TJ Watt. Well, TJ Watt's under a rookie deal. And so that's what the Steelers do. They get guys like TJ Watt and Juju Smith-Schuster, and then they pay their other players to keep that good foundation. And again, a lot of these teams that are spending the big dollar, the Jets, what do they have? Rookie quarterback, or rookie contract for a quarterback. So we're going to say first contract guys. Cleveland Browns, Baker Mayfield. Who else is spending a lot of money here? I can't say the Jaguars are. They just basically did fulls. I'm looking here. Well, Giants, that kind of invalidates that, but they're such a dumpster fire. I don't even know what to think about them. I'm sorry, Giants fans, if you're listening. Baltimore got under the Flacco out from under the Flacco contract, so there's a first-year contract there too. Looking around, Kansas City Chiefs, I'm not sure really what the Chiefs are doing there either, but, I think you get my point. Houston Texans, they signed a safety. What was that? Amos, his name's Amos. I can't think of what his first name is. And then they also signed, Roby. That's because they still have Deshaun Watson under a first-year contract. A lot cheaper to have money. You have a lot more money to spend when you're not blowing anywhere between 20 to 30 mil on a quarterback. So that's something else to keep in mind. And, of course, Mr. Big Chest kind of handcuffing the Steelers there as far as their cap space and that, too. So, Cole Beasley got, what, 4 years, 29 mil for the Buffalo Bills. Cole Beasley. Yeah. I will take Ryan Switzer, Eli Rogers, every day of the week, twice on Sundays, twice on Thursdays and Mondays too, since they play on those days sometimes. That's just that's crazy money. And who got just under that, but it was 5 years instead of 4, was Jesse James. So, I think if somebody would have gave that kind of, if the Steelers would have gave Jesse James that kind of contract, do you think all the Yinzers out there would have been pleased with it? I don't think so. It's just crazy talk. Crazy talk. But 3 years, $25.5 million for Steven Nelson. We'll see what else is going on. Of course, they extended Pouncey. They got the deal done with Foster. Jordan Berry's back. Anthony Chickillo. There's not a whole lot of gaps there. And they're going to need a few gaps if they intend on using all 10 of those draft picks. And they're going to also need some money to be able to sign all those guys as well. So there's a lot of moving parts right now. So don't get discouraged. We were trying to downplay all of this. And I'm actually, I'm even quite surprised with the Nelson signing. I don't know about you, Brian.
I was a little surprised. They paid a little more than I thought that he would garner, but again, with the way the market's been, that shouldn't have been a surprise. And everybody needs to remember they can get out of that contract in a year if it doesn't work out. And so, when you look at the details of the contract, they have a 1 year out, and the total cost would be $9 million. So, it's. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that the reason that they signed the guy is they like the guy. I like the guy. I like what I've seen of him on tape. I like the way he plays, and he's done a good job. Again, solid corner. I don't know how I could have forgotten, but I forgot, the B.J. Finneys and the Pounceys and the Ramon Fosters. That's huge. That's a big deal. You see the kind of money offensive linemen are getting in free agency right now, and the Steelers locked up what is amounting to one of the best offensive lines in football until probably Ben retires. So they've got depth. They've got quality starters. That's a big deal too. So, it does get a little bit under my skin to hear so many fans, and so many supposedly smart talking heads, on the network saying the Steelers didn't do anything. The Steelers absolutely did something. It just isn't necessarily what everybody wanted them to do.
Absolutely. Well, you know what, Brian? I think that kind of puts a bow on this until we get some more free agency news and see what everyone else is doing. I mean, did the Cleveland Browns worry you this year? I mean, I guess any team in the division always worries me, but did they worry you? Like, you view them as a legit contender? I'm still skeptical. You have these big name things, but it looks good on paper. But I remember when the Philadelphia Eagles had that dream team that was supposed to be a dream team several years ago. They made all these big, fancy, flashy moves, and it didn't amount to much of anything there. Just curious on your thoughts, because that's kind of where I'm at. I'm skeptical, and I had the same skepticism last year with the LA Rams, and they had a lot of rental players as far as that too, and they still do because they have, Jared Goff, once again, first contract type guy. Their window the door, the windows, and everything could slam shut pretty fast on them as well.
Yep. I think the Browns are a contender. They certainly appear to be. I think the Browns probably were going to be improved over last year anyway, and they were improved over the year before. Another year in the system, another year of growth for a lot of those players. I think that they have an up-and-coming defense. So do I look at them as a contender? Maybe. But again, you've now taken this wide range of personalities and personality types, and you have all that to mix in and try and control. And there's already, a kerfluffle with OBJ saying he wasn't thrilled to go to Cleveland. Oh, it is what it is. So welcome to drama, Cleveland.
Yeah,
exactly. It could very well. It could very well work out, and they perform well and surprisingly win the division, or not, considering that there's so many people out there saying Cleveland Browns are going to go 16-0 and never lose again until they have to pay somebody. So I don't see that, but I will give them credit. Like I said at the beginning of this, I give them credit for doing what they can do because they're in a position to do it and trying to take advantage of it. We will not know if it works out until all these disparate parts get put together and see what they can accomplish. Bigger contender right now than the Bengals? Yes. Bigger than the Ravens? Maybe. But do I see them as the favorite to win the division? I don't. But that doesn't mean that they don't have a shot.
You know what? And I'm going to even go one step further in saying I don't have a favorite right now. Because I got to wait.
Exactly.
I got to wait and see what else is going to go on here. And we've alluded to this already before. You not only have the draft. I'm waiting to see. Like, it surprises me. I don't think the Browns have a kicker, and they. I thought maybe Steven Gostkowski, who's still floating around out there, probably trying to find his worth before he comes back to the Patriots, as they have tendency to do with their frugal spending at times. I'm like the Browns.
10,000-year-old Sebastian Janikowski.
Well, nobody wants him. I mean, he wasn't even doing kickoff. I don't think he was even doing kickoffs anymore. I mean, yeah, it's amazing he's been around that long. Tip of the cap to him. But I think that it's maybe the end of the road unless somebody gets hurt somewhere and during the season and he's in shape enough to go out there and start booting balls again. But I think the Browns, or maybe they draft a guy, maybe they got an eye on a guy that might slip through the draft and be one of these. That happens a lot with kickers. There's not many draft picks used on kickers. And then the Alliance of American Football, all the guys that are playing there right now who could fill some holes on rosters too. So it'll be very interesting to see. So, Brian, we are up against it for time. So I think it's time to say goodbye to everybody. We may catch you again before the end of the week, but if not, we do have some stuff coming. We're planning on talking about Hall of Honor, potential candidates, another mock draft here in the future, and we may even have some more free agent talk depending on what kind of moves the Steelers make. So, Brian, thanks once again for joining me.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure. So until next time, that's Brian. I'm Joe. We encourage everyone to be safe, be good, and we'll catch you later.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.